In the town of Red Mercy, coffins were never made after a death, they were made before it, and somehow they always fit. The first time the bounty hunter Elias Crow noticed, he told himself it was coincidence. The second time, he began to count 3 days before a gambler was shot outside the saloon. A coffin had appeared in the coffin maker's window. Narrow shoulders, a scratch along the lid, shaped like a spade. 2 days before, a rancher was trampled accidentally in a stampede. Another coffin leaned against the workshop wall, large frame burn mark near the base, and the night before, a young deputy was found with a bullet in his throat. The coffin maker had been sanding a box small enough for a thin man with steady hands. Elias Crow had buried more men than he could remember, but this felt different, because death was predictable in violent towns, but not this predictable. Not this precise, and in Red Mercy, the hammering always came before the gunshot. Red Mercy was a frontier town built on iron, and regret men came for silver, they stayed for survival, and most left in pine boxers. The coffin maker's shop stood at the far end of the main street, away from the saloon and the jailhouse. Quiet, patient, unmoving, its sign read, Edgar Vale. Fine coffins. Burial services no one remembered. When Edgar Vale arrived, he had simply always been there. Tall, thin, pale from sawdust and shadow. His eyes were the color of weathered ash. Elias Crow arrived in Red Mercy, chasing a bounty worth $200. Tom Red Jack Mallory, accused of robbing 2 stagecoaches and killing 1 driver. Last seen entering town 3 nights earlier, Elias rode in at dusk. The street fell quiet. Boots slowed, eyes followed him. Bounty hunters carried storms with them, and sometimes storms stayed. As Elias dismounted outside the saloon, he heard it tap, tap, tap. A hammer striking wood in steady rhythm across the street. The coffin shop door stood open inside. Edgar Vale worked calmly beneath a hanging lantern. He did not look up. Elias watched for a long moment. The coffin on the table was nearly complete. Medium build, broad shoulders, deep lid. Fresh, unclaimed that night, Red Jack Mallory died, not in a duel, not resisting arrest, not dramatically. He was found in the alley behind the saloon, throat cut. No witnesses, no struggle. Elias stood over the body, jaw tight. He had wanted the bounty alive. The sheriff shrugged helplessly. Red Mercy ain't kind to outlaws, but Elias wasn't listening. He was looking at the coffin, already waiting beside the church. Already finished, already measured, already fitting. The next morning, Elias walked into Edgar Vale's shop. The air smelled of pine and oil. Edgar continued sanding without glancing up. You measure? Before they die, Elias said. Edgar's voice was soft, calm. I measure everyone. Elias studied him. Red Jack arrived 3 days ago. Yes. And you built that coffin before he was found dead. Yes. Elias stepped closer. How did you know? Edgar finally looked up. His eyes did not blink. In Red Mercy, he said, death is rarely a surprise. That's not an answer. It is the only one. Elias's hand rested near his revolver. You predicting murders? No. You causing them. A faint smile touched Edgar's lips. Do you believe a hammer can command a gun? Elias didn't answer, because in this town, he wasn't sure over the next week. Elias delayed leaving. He told himself it was unfinished business. Truth was curiosity, had sunk its teeth into him. Another coffin appeared. In Edgar's window, slim short, a dent on the lower right corner. 2 days later, a card dealer was shot during a drunken argument. The bullet shattered his lower rib. Exactly where the dent rested, Elias confronted Edgar. Again. You're doing something? Edgar continued, carving quietly. People choose their paths. Then why do your coffins match their endings? Edgar paused just briefly. Because men are predictable? Elias's eyes narrowed. How fear, Edgar replied. Simply greed, pride, desperation. He placed the carving tool down. When a gambler loses too much, he reaches for his gun. When a drunk insults the wrong man, he bleeds. When an outlaw believes he can outrun consequences, he looked directly at Elias. He dies behind a saloon. Silence filled the workshop. You're watching them, Elias said slowly. I am watching everyone. The words felt heavier than they should have. One morning, Elias saw something new. Inside the coffin shop stood a box different from the others. Darker wood, stronger grain, wider. Shoulders, longer frame. It wasn't in the window, it wasn't on display, it was behind the workbench, hidden, but visible. Elias stepped inside. Edgar did not speak that one. Elias said quietly. Who's it for? Edgar's hands rested gently on the wood. It is unfinished. That's not what I asked. Edgar met his gaze calmly. It is for a man who believes he can interrupt fate. The air tightened. Elias felt something stir in his chest. You think that's me? Edgar tilted his head slightly. Is it? Elias stepped closer to the coffin, ran his hand along the edge. It matched his height, his shoulders, even the slight curve in his spine, from years in the saddle. Coincidence, it had to be you threatening me, Elias asked. Quietly, Edgar's voice. Did not change. I build what I see coming. And what do you see? A long pause, then you standing in front of this coffin. Outside, a gunshot echoed through town. Both men turned toward the sound, but Edgar did not look surprised. He never did, and somewhere deep inside, Elias Crow. For the first time in years, a question took root. Was he chasing criminals, or walking straight into something already decided? Elias Crow stepped outside, hand resting on his revolver. A young ranch hand lay bleeding in the dirt. Men surrounded him in stunned silence. The boy's chest rose weakly. Someone whispered. He was looking past the body, at Edgar Vale's shop. The coffin in the back room. The one shaped like him. The ranch hand died before sundown. And before night fully swallowed red mercy, a coffin already stood, waiting outside the church, perfect length. No adjustments, no trimming. The hammering had stopped, as if the work had already been completed long before the bullet was fired. Elias walked back into the coffin shop that evening. Edgar was cleaning his tools. You knew, Elias said quietly. I suspected, Edgar replied. That boy was barely 20. Already drinking too much. Already fighting men stronger than him. Elias stepped closer. You're pushing them. Edgar's pale eyes lifted. I never touch them. You don't have to? The words lingered, because Elias was beginning to understand something darker than murder. Influence didn't require blood on your hands. Sometimes it only required a whisper. The next day, Elias began watching Edgar more carefully. He noticed small things, suggestions. A gambler entered the shop, nervous. I've had a bad feeling lately, the gambler muttered. Feelings are rarely brung, he said softly. The gambler swallowed, left pale. 2 days later, he challenged the wrong man at a poker table. Another coffin fit perfectly. Elias confronted Edgar again. You're planting fear. I am reflecting it, Edgar replied. You tell them death is near. I tell them what they already know. Elias slammed his palm against the workbench. You're shaping outcomes. You track men, Edgar continued. You remind them they are hunted. How many died trying to escape you? Because Elias knew the answer. Many men who might have surrendered if they had not believed. Death was inevitable. Edgar's gaze did not waver. Perhaps, he said softly, we both carve wood. The unfinished coffin waited behind the workbench. This time, it wasn't blank. Carved faintly into the underside. of the lid were initials. E.C. Elias Crow. His jaw tightened. Edgar's voice came from the doorway behind him. "You shouldn't look at what isn't finished." Elias turned slowly. "You think writing my name makes it true?" "No," Edgar said calmly. "Then what does?" Elias imagined it. Leaving red mercy, writing. Ease, ignoring the pattern, ignoring the unease. But something in him resisted. A hunter doesn't leave unfinished questions. Edgar studied him quietly. "You see," he said softly, "the coffin does not control you. Your nature does." Elias's hand tightened into a fist. "You built this to provoke me." "No," Edgar replied. "I built it because you will not leave. Or perhaps a decision." By morning, Elias had made up his mind. He spread word through town. No duels, no gambling tonight, no drinking. The townsfolk stared in confusion. "Anyone starts trouble," Elias warned, "answers to me." He wanted to break the pattern. To prove Edgar wrong. To prove fate was nothing but wood and imagination. Edgar watched from his doorway, silent, patient. Night fell. The town remained tense but quiet. No gunshots, no fights, no shouting. For the first time in weeks, the hammer did not strike wood. Elias stood in the center of the street beneath a rising moon. He allowed himself a breath, then a scream. It came from the coffin shop. Elias ran, burst through the door. Edgar Vale lay on the floor, bleeding, a knife in his chest. The unfinished coffin overturned beside him. "No," Elias whispered. Edgar coughed weakly. "You see," he murmured. "You didn't build this," Elias said. Edgar's faint smile returned. "No." "Then who?" Edgar's eyes drifted toward the doorway, toward the street. Someone who feared losing control. Understanding hit Elias, too late. The town, the fear, the resentment. They had grown tired of feeling predicted. Tired of believing death waited in pine boxers. A miner stood outside, hands shaking, blood on his sleeve. "I couldn't take it anymore," the miner whispered. "He always looked at me like he knew." Elias looked back at Edgar. The coffin maker's breathing grew shallow. "Did you know this would happen?" Elias asked quietly. Edgar's lips moved faintly. "Yes, and you let it." A long pause. Then choice. His eye stilled. The lantern flickered. Silence filled the shop. Edgar Vale was buried 3 days later. In a coffin he never finished. Red Mercy changed after that. No more predictions. No more early hammering. No more quiet suggestions. The deaths did not stop entirely, but they slowed. Men hesitated longer before drawing guns. Gamblers folded earlier. Drunks walked away more often. Fear no longer had a carpenter shaping it. Elias stood alone inside the empty coffin shop one last time. The coffin carved for him still rested against the wall, unfinished. No lid, no polish, just raw wood. He ran his hand across the initials, E.C. Then he dragged the coffin outside, split it apart with an axe. Board by board, until nothing remained but broken planks. He left Red Mercy at dawn. Then, as he rode away, he felt something strange. Not relief, not victory, but uncertainty. Because Edgar Vale had never forced a trigger, never held a knife, never touched a man's throat. He had only spoken quietly, observed patiently, and built what he believed was coming. Maybe fate wasn't written in the stars. Maybe it wasn't carved in wood. Maybe it lived in the choices men made after someone convinced them an ending was already waiting. Behind him, Red Mercy grew smaller. In the dust. And for the first time in years, Elias Crow wondered, had he destroyed fate? Or simply proven that he was never free from it?